Never again shall we march like sheep to the slaughter. Never again leave our sons and daughters. Before I even really had the full context of that, I always thought that was powerful. Right now, or at the very least, finishing up anyway, I've been in a binge reading phase of life, or a binge reading thing. And in that binge reading phase, I think the last book that I've ended up on was The Third Reich at War. The section on the Jews is traumatic. It's traumatic to read. If I was a weaker man, I would have wept through it. Never again means something. And I don't mean something in the sense that everything means something. I mean, there's a gravity to it, just based on the trauma that took place. Human beings mass slaughtering one another. And not just slaughtering one another, starving to death, medical experimentation, just outright viciousness. I mean, imagine for the moment an individual being vicious towards you and have all power over you to do whatever they want. Not to mention this notion of insecurity being played out within the context of the German soldiers being expressed on the Jews where they can take their property and all this other stuff. It's absolutely traumatic to read. And this wasn't all Germans, so don't misunderstand me. I mean, you have many Germans who looked at this. In fact, most looked at this and thought this was way beyond the pale. But at the point, they couldn't do anything. Or at least not do anything significant to stop the political situation. Not to mention, Hitler didn't like blacks all that much either. When the government started to implode, and you can imagine for America for the moment, if we are in a war that we are losing, and the government starts to implode under the stress, and on the airwaves, they start spewing all of this racist, vitriolic content. You know, these niggers are coming in there, you know, America's using them as weapons, and the Jews are behind sending America and Britain against us, all sorts of nonsense. The conspiracy theories that they themselves believe, the ideological beliefs that push Hitler to start that war and to lose that war. My point is, never again means something. And by the way, it means something not just in the Jewish context. At the end of that war, you had the Nuremberg trials. You had the world coming together, trying to create some legal apparatus by which to judge what took place. Because they didn't want it to be a Versailles Treaty type thing again and just repeat the process all over again. The world came together to say, this will not happen again. The expression might have been against Jews and Russians, but ultimately what we're talking about is that the never again thing is a human thing. It's an earth thing. This is something that we should not allow to take place on this particular planet. History doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it does rhyme, and I do believe that it rhymes. I've argued that what's taking place here in the United States are not Nazi concentration camps, because they're not Nazi concentration camps. Germany had a very unique particular history that allowed it to go down that particular path. It doesn't mean that what is taking place in the United States, however, is not atrocious, and it is. By our standards, it is dramatically atrocious. You have the Trump administration arguing in court that not having toothpaste and soap is in any way akin to sanitary conditions. You have people packed in these cells, so much so the media said the stench, and yeah, they used the term stench, was overpowering when they walked in. And they're still grabbing people. Mississippi, they vanished, hundreds of people that were working at that plant. Kids looking, not knowing if they were going to see their parents again. Bam, taken, vanished, gone, disappeared. No, they're not wearing a star, but they do have a mark on them, don't they? Jews for Peace have taken the never again thing and they've applied it to what is taking place here in the United States with those camps that Donald Trump is running. They are making a statement, never again. And the only thing they have to make that statement with is their bodies. Jews for Peace throw their bodies in the system itself to protest what is taking place for immigration and ICE. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. And yeah, a bit of a long intro, but I wanted to explain my context and where I was coming from this. Never again doesn't necessarily mean what is taking place in Palestine. That's something different. That is not a never again thing. That is something different. That is a culture that is expressing outright trauma, but have no moral justification to do so. A trauma exacted upon you does not necessarily give you any kind of moral right to exact the trauma on somebody else. So there's that. But in this particular situation, this organization, Jews for Peace, is saying, look, never again. And that's a world thing, not just a Jewish thing. And what is taking place in the United States is beyond the pale. And we are not going to stand by with the cultural tradition that we have and allow this to take place. And you know why I love this? Because, look, all of us, no matter who we are, regardless of tribe and all this other stuff, we're just people. We're thrown into a particular historical context and within a flow of history. And we can find ourselves on pretty much any side of all sorts of things. Not necessarily because we willed it so, but because of when, where, and the conditions by which we found ourselves. The Jews for Peace thing, I find this to be awesome, or the Jews against ICE. Because in the same way that I pursue the world and I look at issues around the world, I look at my context here, and there's certain things that are particular here to me, but those particularities are for everybody. Everybody have their own particular experiences. And in that difference, we're a lot alike. They're applying their historical context to this. This is them outside of what detention facility?
The sisters in Rhode Island are still alive and are fighting for you. Your brothers and sisters of the United States of America are still alive and fighting for you everywhere. We are here for you and for you. And I'm talking to all of them inside. I wish they all hear all of us. Never again. Never again. Never again. Your brothers and the sisters in Rhode Island are still alive and are fighting for you. Your brothers and sisters of the United States of America are still alive and fighting for you everywhere.
Now, cops are maniacs. Cops are maniacs. We were watching the protests in Hong Kong. And I'm going to do a video on that, but I was watching mainstream media cover the protests in Hong Kong yesterday, and they are so bad at their jobs. And it wasn't just the protests in Hong Kong, it was several items. And I was bugging the hell out of my tech as it went on, because I'm like, they're missing this, and this, and they're not talking about this. And you wonder, is it incompetence? Are they just reading off stories without necessarily investing into the stories themselves? Like, why are they reading a story this way that has more dimensions to it? And even in the pictures that they're showing, not even explaining the pictures that are being shown to them and the context of it. Like, it's extraordinary. My point is this. The media has lavished over those protests in Hong Kong. Loved it. Don't show you the yellow vest protests at all. You would never see that on airwaves. Love the Hong Kong protests. They would never allow that type of protest in the United States. They were beating cops. They were torching police stations. They would never allow that level of action and protest in the United States. It would never happen. Without, I'm saying, because think back to Ferguson. Think back to all these places. They had tanks. They have all sorts of stuff that they're driving through the streets, like into these communities. What took place in Hong Kong and all of this lip popping that the media in the United States is doing, they wouldn't allow it here. Cops are maniacs. Look at what happens at night. They're confronted by the guards who don't like that they're out there complaining. But these are some of the pictures from it, but there's something specific that I'm looking for. I just added up, I'm sorry. And I'm told to give a trigger warning because they were assaulted by the police. I think it's this one right here. Take a look at this. They're out there, they're protesting, they're blocking the entrance. Again, their argument is, look, we don't have anything else to stop or to throw a wrench into the political apparatus of this country. Only thing we have is our bodies. We're going to throw our bodies on the line. Now, whether this is productive or not, I think, look, I think protests need to be their tactic. So don't misunderstand me. But their thing is, look, we're going to draw attention to this. And it has to start somewhere. And we are going to block this facility. We're going to engage in peaceful protests, but we're going to block this facility. We're going to get across our displeasure with what is taking place. We said never again, and there's a higher moral authority to get involved into this process and not sit by. The legal structure is not real. The legal structure are laws that the society, for the most part, agrees upon. But that's stuff that legislators agree upon. Doesn't make it right in what we consider in the human moral sense of the word. And I understand morality is subjective to some degree. But I would imagine packing people in cages and not giving them adequate facilities to clean and food or drink, or either if it's soap, that fits as immoral to me. Especially when it doesn't have to be that way. This is what happens at night.
When I say release the, you say kids. Release the.
Kids! Kids!
When I say release the, you say parents. Release the.
Parents! Parents! Thank you for being with us. Thank you for staying with us. Whoa! We have... Stay with us. We have someone... Shame! Shame! Oh, fuck! Oh, fuck!
Shame! Shame!
Oh, my God. We have a truck that's just ran over our protesters.
The whole world is watching!
The whole world is watching. Please share this feed. We just had someone try to commit manslaughter. We're here at the Y detention facility in Central Falls, Rhode Island. The driver of this truck, Connecticut plates.
No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! When I say close the, you say camps! Close the! Camps! Close the!
The whole world is watching! The whole world is watching!
I know it's okay. Calm down, calm down.
I got pepper spray.
I know, sit down.
Please help me.
Fucking do, you bastard!
Sit on the grass.
You deserve 10 times worse!
I know, it's okay.
You allowed that! Disgusting!
Look, I understand there's some right-wingers who say, well, look, they shouldn't have come to the country, and that breaking into the country is illegal and all that good stuff. And I'm not one of those people for open borders, so there's that, even though I know the left often gets hit with that particular label. But even if you think it's illegal, shouldn't you have basic quality of health for the individuals that you've decided to put in imprisonment from the standpoint of state? Meaning, this is atrocious. Even if you're a right-winger and you think that it was illegal coming across the border. Okay. Does that also mean that you need to put them in hellish situations? Also, does that mean that with knowing that these things are overcrowded and overpacked and that they don't have the supplies and everything else, should you still be out there arresting people who are not criminals, who are not injuring the society at all? I guess I'm making the point that even if you're a right-winger and you believe that I don't want quote-unquote illegals into the country, isn't there an order of operations in regards to how you go about doing that particular thing? And maybe the order of operations is that the people who are contributing to your society that may not necessarily be here from a legal standpoint may, in all other spirit of the term, be American. Do you realize that half of the businesses, nearly half, a little bit less than half, are started either by people who are immigrants or descendants of immigrants? They're not drags in our system. Yes, there will be some. There's always some probability. And in the case of somebody committing crimes and stuff like that, go after them. Have at it. Do your thing. But the truth of it is, the sad truth is that many of the people that are getting are just mothers and fathers, just like you and I, that just so happen to have a different growth curve or, let's say, plot in life. Quirk of nature. Quirk of luck. Quirk of luck. It's unnecessary, man. And I give them all the credit in the world for taking a stand. Jews against ICE. I thought this was Jews against peace. I'm sorry, Jews for peace, I'm sorry. But Jews against ICE. I'll leave it here. Thanks all.